how wild of a journey, how crazy has it been for you from your perspective? Because you mentioned you talked about, radio, and then when cable was just taking off. And again, I remember, sitting with my grandfather, having to pay for pay-per-view to watch a South Carolina football game. Like it was South Carolina Troy or South Carolina Louisiana Lafayette. I mean, I remember listening to games on the radio. I mean, again, this was like 2003 or 4, but still, like there were some games you couldn't watch. And then we get into this day and age where it's like everything is streamed. You talked about Tiger Vision, which in my head I was thinking this sounds a lot like Longhorn Network and like some of the predetermined networks like the SEC, ACC, all that stuff. And I mean, we're seeing it change even more and more. Like, and then of course social media just completely changes the game with athletics as a whole, but certainly college athletics and recruiting and the way everything happens. Like, how crazy is it for you just seeing the evolution? Because again, it's literally changed the way media operates with all of these different changes to television, radio, social media, all of it.
Yeah, it does. And I'll give an example, like for instance, with you and someone like Jay Crane, Jay Boy, as he's lovingly called. You got to have the sports acumen, but you also have to have a business acumen about you to be successful in the world of podcasting or having your own YouTube channel or whatever it is you do. All right, you have to have. And I was just talking to Colin Cowherd the other day before he made the announcement about J-Boy on his podcast network that he just opened up, and that's probably, I think, what separates Colin from his generation. He's 10 years younger than me, Colin, and he actually did some play-by-play early in his career, but he didn't particularly like it. He didn't want to travel that much, and he didn't like the idea of staying in, college towns and seedy hotels, which I can understand that. I've certainly stayed in a number of them through the years. You have to take the good with the bad, so to speak. But his understanding of how the business operates, okay, and not just being a part of Fox's content, which he is paramount in Fox's content, but he also creates his own content that he owns, that is licensed to him. And, I never thought about being a businessman in the television business. And in fact, the one time that I was sort of in that area was when my radio show began being televised on CBS Sports Network. And it was a pain in the ass to me. I did not like it at all. I didn't like being responsible for others' well-being. The guys that were working for me, as I was literally the independent contractor that owned the rights to the show that CBS Sports Network would put out over the air. And those guys worked for me, just as I'm sure they do for Dan Patrick and they do for Colin and whatever else. But I did not like that. I was not comfortable with that at all. But I think the downside for guys of your generation is that you sort of pass by the different stages of development that our generation had to go through. Okay. And when I was coming up, you couldn't be on television if you hadn't first been on radio. I mean, you really couldn't. And along the way in radio, you developed a skill set, voice projection and how to use your voice are things that I think maybe your generation, unless they really work on it, it kind of passes you by. You don't. So it's not exactly the same.
I would say, Tim, to interject, if you listen to my podcast 2 years ago versus now, or even I'd say a year ago, I would agree with you 110%. I tell people you have to find your voice. You really have to find. Yeah. So,
find out who you are, to develop who you are, as opposed to doing an impression of someone that you like, which happens a lot. Even Joe Buck has said that in the beginning, he was doing a poor man's Pat Summerall impression. I mean, he's even said that. The best in the business have admitted from time to time that finding out who you are and being comfortable looking into that red light and talking into that microphone is not easily accomplished. It takes a while. And that development from stage to stage on a career path similar to the one I took or any other guy my age might have taken was regimented. Okay. Like you had to decide whether you were going to be a studio guy or a play-by-play guy. You had to make a decision on that. Now, I got a lot out of doing both and became, I think, more successful because I could do both well. Not everybody can, but I never really got into the business to be a studio host. I just happened to be good at it, and ESPN wanted to take advantage of that. And I actually fought with them over it quite a bit. And look what happened. I wound up at CBS doing what? Primarily hosting the SEC on CBS. But I also got a lot of play-by-play reps in a lot of other sports. I mean, a lot of other sports. And then in between leaving ESPN, you didn't mention this, but I was at Turner for 3 years. I did the NBA playoffs. I did the Braves with Ernie Johnson's dad, Ernie Johnson Sr. Got a World Series ring out of it. So I was able to do a lot of different things for a number of different networks and grow everywhere I went. But once you made that decision, you had to live with that decision. And in today's world, the sky's the limit. Once you got a podcast, it does well. Now you go on and you got a gig doing this or that. Next thing you know, you're doing a midday show on cable television. And lo and behold, somebody calls you and says, hey, would you like to host Jeopardy? Would you like to fill in for Jimmy Kimmel? You know, all these things can happen. But in my day, if you had made that choice, for instance, this is a great example. Wheel of Fortune could have been my job in 1988. And Merv Griffin called my agent. I had nothing. I never dreamed of being a game show host or I thought that I could be a game show host. But he liked my work on ESPN, thought I'd be a suitable replacement for Pat Sajak. Sajak was going to do a talk show on CBS. So he didn't give up the syndicated version of Wheel, but he had to give up the daytime version, which was on NBC. Well, they had to have a cattle call of auditions to see who could work with Vanna. And I went out and did an audition, and you can see it. You can Google me and find it. It went really well. I did it in one take without a problem. And when it was over, I thought I had the job. Now, it would have changed my life. If I had gotten that job, okay, Chris, if I had gotten that job, ESPN at the time was promoting it. They were happy that it was going on because they only had 25 million homes back then. And having one of their Sports Center hosts being the host of the #1 game show in television would have been a real coup. So they were happy about it at the time. But if I had gotten that gig, who knows how much credibility I would have lost as a play-by-play guy and host of college sports. You know, I would have probably been lampooned by a number of critics because times were different then.
Right.
You know, I mean, who is this guy? He's talking to some woman from Indiana about, book club on a Tuesday. What the hell is he doing a football game? You know what I mean? So times have changed now. People can do whatever they want, however they want, if they're good at it. Okay. Your generation has that going for it. But it also, I think, is unfortunate that all of the different levels of growth that our generation went through, yours isn't. So that's the difference, really.